I'm Glenn McGuinness, and this is Outburst. This week, are you up for a possible federal election during the pandemic?
I'd be all for another election.
To be quite honest, I don't think that it would be a wise move.
I don't think it'll make any difference one way or the other. So, yeah, have at it.
There's no time for arguing about politics. It's life or death.
But first, we've been seeing some hopeful signs that COVID is backing off as numbers go down in many provinces. Stricter measures put in place in Ontario and Quebec may have helped, but as those rules become more relaxed, concerns over a potential variant-driven third wave looms over these loosening restrictions. So we took this question to Canadians.
Is it still too soon to ease restrictions across the country?
That's a good question. Yeah, this is a really tough one, right? Because for those that the restrictions are affecting, they're definitely impacted harder. We look at a lot of the services industries, they're closed, they can't get any sort of livelihood, they're relying on government income. So we have to look at it as we either choose one or the other. We're sort of in this rolling factor of going back and forth, and so that really hurts businesses and people because there's no planning there. So if we have some sort of restrictions where we can allow certain elements, enforce that we're wearing masks, enforce that we're social distancing, making sure that we're enforcing those rules, not just stating them and letting them slide. I think that's important. But as far as the restrictions go, there's certainly some aspects that could definitely use a bit of a lift.
I think that's best left up to the medical professionals to weigh in on. I think probably wintertime isn't a good time to start to ease up. Probably easier to ease up in the spring when more people can be outside.
Well, if people did the right thing, eventually the restrictions will be lifted.
Yes. I think in Quebec and Ontario, they're in a way different boat than we are in Alberta. But I think we need to go slow, and some things can be lifted. I think we just need to look at the evidence and, just a little bit at a time, not open the floodgates.
I don't think so. I think we have to even probably go further, especially what you see happening in other countries. I look at New Zealand as an example where, they don't have much of an economy right now, but they've had pretty much 2 cases, I think, over the last couple months. I think about 29 deaths, but in Canada, we certainly see it's still a concern for us. I mean, in Alberta, you see it going from 1,500 to 900 to 400. So the numbers are going down, which is positive. But, with the vaccine now, we don't have any more Pfizer. So that's going to be an issue. We have to really focus on that to keep those numbers down.
I think we still have a ways to go. People still need to be diligent in wearing their masks and following the protocols and doing what they can.
I think for a lot of places it should be a little too soon. Cases haven't really slowed down a whole lot in Calgary per se, but again, it's hard to say with businesses. I know it's a struggle for a lot of businesses to stay shut down. It's a tough call for sure.
Yeah, they should ease the restrictions to let people socialize. Small groups, but socialize.
Yeah, I think so. Because people don't take it serious anymore, and you have to take it serious. If you look at that funny commercial with that stupid COVID guy, which is not very fitting, I think you would show something more drastic, like people in ICUs where they die, people would take it more serious. So I think we should still wait a little bit, at least a couple of more weeks, and then we can slowly ease it up.
There's an awful lot of places that are really close to at-risk people, Indigenous people, and if we open up a city that surrounds a reserve and then expose all of those people that don't have the same number of antibodies to this without the same amount of quarantining and the same amount of vaccines, then, we're going to kill people. So, no, we cannot open up coast to coast. We can do small community openings as we've started to do in some of the zones in New Brunswick.
No, I think that the restrictions have been eased a long time ago. The lockdowns have been talked about many different times, and there's quite a bit of information now that would indicate that the lockdowns weren't as successful as some people would like to think they were.
Across the country, I would say I think so, just because each province kind of is doing everything at their own pace. Some are worse than others. It was definitely nice when we had the bubble going this summer. That was nice, but even New Brunswick, where we just had this big kind of flare-up, it's best to probably take things cautiously, you know?
I would say so. Not enough people are vaccinated. Too many people. I think people are getting sick and tired of all this, and I'm well aware of that, but I do think it's too soon to just relax because our healthcare system is already broken, and we just don't have the capacity to take care of the people that would get sick, so too soon.
Yeah, a little bit too soon. Maybe 3-4 months.
Definitely. I'd say the sooner that vaccine gets out to everyone, then we can start thinking about really opening up, because we need that in everyone. That really is the only ticket to opening up, and people need to stop just getting too antsy about it.
I think we should keep the restrictions up as long as we can to really give it a good boot before we ease up. We were loving it this summer. It was going good, and we eased up, and we slipped back in, so I think we should keep the restrictions up. I know it hurts business, but I think we need to get rid of that so we can get our lives back to normal.
I think it is too soon for many regions. I feel like the Atlantic Canada over time could come back to Atlantic bubble of some sort because we had an early drop on the pandemic for our own government taking that action, but I don't know about the rest of Canada.
You know, I don't think so. No. People, we were just talking about this at the office, people just don't listen. If they would listen and do what we were told to do, then this probably would be resolved, you know, or as well as it could be resolved.
If you ask me, I think we are being a little too lax, because anytime we end up being lax, we end up going right back to where we started.
I like how we're kind of doing it province to province, to be honest, because I don't feel like we should all be penalized just because one province is doing really bad. I feel like we're doing the right thing right now, like weekly going a little bit at a time and seeing how we're doing. So I like that, but I don't believe that every province should be doing that.
When the pandemic hit, those who run the country were broadsided at the very least and had to act fast. In the beginning, many Canadians applauded the efforts of the federal government to help Canadians through CERB and other programs. But almost 12 months in, vaccine procurement has become a big part of what's going on. And in terms of steering Canadians to the other side of COVID-19, what ideas would you have to enhance the job the government is doing? Our question:
how could the federal government improve its pandemic response?
I think it's tricky. I think no matter who's in power, there's always going to be someone who's not happy with the decisions they're making. And I think in retrospect, we'll see what they should have done differently. But I can't pinpoint something specific.
I think it's good to keep safe old people, the seniors, but to let the young people and the middle generation to keep living.
How could they do a better job? Well, I guess just keep up the border closure, because that's made me feel much more secure, and just keep up the restrictions until our numbers are better.
I'm not sure how, because nobody has a magic ball where they can figure out what's happening. I think the response is the best they could, and I think they're doing a great job, because nobody knew that was coming, and afterwards everybody knew it better. So I think they're doing a great job.
Well, they could start taking the recommendations of reports that they request. There was a report that was requested in the 90s on what the biggest threat was, and they identified a pandemic back in the 90s. And nothing was done with that report on the government level, so I think we have to start listening to experts when they tell us things.
So I think the federal government has done a fairly good job with its pandemic response. I think we're seeing some steps in the right direction in terms of travel, right? We've seen recent announcements about the borders closing and encouraging Canadians to stay home and not travel in the event of further restrictions. That's helpful. We've seen how many millions of people enter and leave the country since the pandemic started. And of course, with that comes bringing those COVID cases, bringing that UK strain here. So as long as we're extremely cautious about that, we've seen different examples from countries like New Zealand who have really handled that well in terms of their isolation period. So I think overall, Canada's done a pretty good job. We've had about 18,000 deaths, so that comes into question of how good we've actually done, because we've had quite a few Canadians who have lost their lives, but I definitely think there's room for improvement.
They're just paying, they're paying everybody a stipend, if you want to call it that, to survive. Now there's rumor of the Great Reset, so it's really difficult to say, exactly Is it for their own political purposes, or is it something else? You know, that's my question. And it seems to be it's political more than anything, in my opinion.
I understand it's tricky, but if there were some resources or people available to take a more individualistic look at what's happening, or to be able to dig into the programs that are being closed or restricted but are actually safe places to be, I think if they could take a little peek into, or if they had the time and resources to take more of a look into that, to do an accurate shutdown of what needs to be shut down and what are the high percentages of transferring the virus versus industries that might not be.
Well, I think they're doing pretty well right now. You know, every day we're following the Prime Minister with his 10-15 minutes, how you call that, there was a shot that he comes out there and give to opinion to ask people not to do this or that, you know, and give information. I think we're well informed, you know. Same thing in New Brunswick with Dr. Russell and the Premier. Everything is well covered.
To be honest, like, I don't really know. This is something new. Like, I've never been through a pandemic. You've never been through a pandemic. So it's hard to know what the right thing is to do in the moment. You're kind of listening to all these different advisors, taking information about other countries, like how they're responding. And just, I think they're doing the best that they possibly can. So I don't think there's anything different that they could do at the moment. But that's just my personal opinion, so.
There needs to be more relief for those who are affected, because the limitations on their restrictions I find is just a little ludicrous. I was affected by it myself, and I was just under the threshold and was denied for it, and that was the worst affection there. Thankfully got back to work pretty quickly once the lockdown lifted, but there could be more towards the folk who are going to be affected at the bottom, because it doesn't matter what's happening at the top, it's everyone at the bottom who's been hit the hardest.
Vaccinations. That is so frustrating. Honestly, I have no idea why we're not being vaccinated right now. Like, if it's there, I mean, we can get flu shots at any time. Why can't we get a vaccination that can help us move on as a city, as a province, as a country? So,
I guess I haven't been focused too much nationally, mostly provincially. So maybe a bit more unity between the provinces and the way they're handling things. Certainly the vaccine kind of rollout is going to be weird because each province is going to be doing it their own kind of way. So that might be an area where they kind of want to get things kind of on the same page.
By getting more on-the-ground response, having the community members that are most directly affected have their voices be heard more. I would really be interested to know what the majority of the people that run these long-term care centers think about how we're dealing with the pandemic, because I personally haven't heard from any of them. They're too busy saving lives. It would be really interesting to know that the federal government was taking direct action as directed by the most at-risk citizens, which would be Indigenous people and the elderly.
I don't know if I could give you any thoughtful answer to that question right off the bat, other than the fact that I think that say that they maybe have overreacted in some cases not soon enough and overreacted in some cases too late.
I think the number one thing is we've got to get the vaccine out to everybody. We've got to get that out to everybody, all age ranges, as fast as we can to stop it and keep supporting the provinces in getting that out to folks.
Be quick. You know, we heard about all those cases rising, and I even knew that after New Year's stuff was going to hit the fan, and I don't think they responded as quick as they should have. They should have instantly known that, okay, New Year's is going to affect everything, Christmas is going to affect everything. Why did they wait a week to see the stuff come out? We knew it was coming.
I feel like we should look more towards the New Zealand and Australian outcomes, because it doesn't matter of party lines, more of the outcomes of how they shut down all borders and had 14-day quarantine in a hotel, which they're currently talking about, but it's a matter of opinion-based, and their decision comes first, I guess.
The Confederation Bridge connects PEI to which province? Is it Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, or Quebec? The answer is New Brunswick. The Confederation Bridge connects Borden-Carleton Prince Edward Island to Cape Jormain, New Brunswick. It officially opened in 1997, and at 12.9 kilometers, it is Canada's longest bridge and the world's longest bridge over ice-covered waters. Before being officially named Confederation Bridge, Prince Edward Islanders would often refer to it as the fixed link.
With the average lifespan of a minority government lasting about 2 years, give or take a few months, this spring could mean the beginning of another federal election campaign, while everything else COVID-related happens around us. Since the pandemic began, we've seen provincial and municipal elections across the country. But on the federal level, is this something we need right now? Our question.
How would you feel about a federal election during the pandemic?
I'd be all for another election. I got nothing to get. I mean, any time is a good time to vote in someone else. You know, I'm not big on Trudeau at all.
I don't think it's a good time. Everybody's going through the pandemic and everything. You should wait till it's over, I think.
I don't think it would be a good idea.
Why is that?
Well, just because of the people having to get out and be in contact with each other. And I also wonder if everyone would get out to vote. I think a lot of people might not vote.
Anytime we have an election, it's fine with me. I don't think it'll make any difference one way or the other. So, yeah, have at it.
I think there's enough going on already. I don't need complications. Yeah.
Okay.
So I would be negative on that.
And why? Can you elaborate?
Just too much going on. I've got a channel running in my head, the COVID channel, and I don't need. They can wait. We're not doing anything ridiculous. Everybody, there's no hurry.
I don't think that's a good idea. I think it'd be a waste of time.
Same here.
I don't think that the way the parties are right now, I doubt if there'd be any change. I think it would still end up being a minority government, and I think the government should concentrate on the economy and looking after the coronavirus. I wouldn't want to waste time on an election right now, especially there's so much time left in the mandate.
I think it would cause too much chaos. I mean, if you look south of the border, this is a pretty poor example because we're dealing with somebody who had no plan at all. But I think the transference of power could potentially cause issues. And I think at this particular time, it wouldn't hurt everybody just to wait a year.
It would be a little bit scattered to think about a federal election, but I'd be happy to see a new whole batch of possibilities there, a new administration and everything. But it would probably be hard to pull off in the midst of this.
I don't think we need a federal election at this point. I don't think the Conservative leader has had enough time to get himself known. So I think it would be unfair. I think Mr. Trudeau would have a little bit of a leg up there. That said, I am quite pleased with the way Mr. Trudeau is handling the affairs. So,
if the election time is coming up, then yeah, they should do it, right? Because there is a time frame on it. But I don't think it's the best time to go for election or to know people's opinion. If people are busy or worried about their COVID stuff, so yeah.
We don't need to spend that kind of money. We need to spend that money on helping people and COVID and vaccines and things like that. I mean, those are the important things. An election, no, not at this point.
I feel like it would be an inconvenience to the population and unjustified overall, because it would take a matter of stability that we don't have currently.
Well, if it needs to be, it needs to be. Why, there's nothing that they're going to do revolving around my answer. So if they want to have an election, they'll have an election.
Well, if it was necessary, I would say okay, but to be quite honest, I don't think that it would be a wise move.
I don't think it's time to do an election at any time. I think we got to focus on the virus right now, getting healthy. The only reason why a politician would do it is in their favor, really, because they'd be saying, we would do this or we would do that, or, you know, we've done this great. Like the Liberals have done pretty good. I'm not a Liberal, but they did pretty good with, you know, coming to the people and giving them the funding. But so I feel like that would be something that they would try to do an election right now to go in their favor. But no, we don't have time for an election right now.
So right now it really needs to be about making sure that we're looking after our fellow citizens. There's no time for arguing about politics. It's life or death.
Maybe it's a possibility in the fall if it needs to happen, but I wouldn't think it'd be something to go forward with just yet.
I would say no. Like, it's just not called for, I don't think, at the time, so nah.
I prefer to wait till after the pandemic. I know a lot of people vote absentee ballots and things like that, but I prefer to wait to get the full vote of the country out with no worry of pandemic virus or any of that kind of stuff.
Well, we went through in New Brunswick there, and I think it went well. I don't know, people, you know, from Canada, my opinion there, I'm not against, but maybe it should wait a bit.
About the same as the provincial election. I feel that while it's a normal election, I feel it'll be fine, but I don't think it's time to call for a change of leadership at the moment. I think it's something that we should definitely not push back just because of COVID, but I don't think we should call an early one if that's what it came to. I think everything's doing fine. I think it just needs to, they need to start thinking about us at the bottom rather than what's going on at the top of things.
The Prime Minister, just like many other world leaders, had to act fast when COVID hit, providing billions in taxpayer dollars to help keep businesses and people financially afloat. But critics will tell you as soon as the money started rolling out, there wasn't enough scrutiny as to who got what or how we're going to pay this back. So we took this question to Canadians.
Have your tax dollars been spent wisely to fight COVID-19?
I think it's necessary, not only wise, but necessary. We have a period of time here to go through where a lot of people are losing their livelihoods and they have to be protected for the time that they're out of their work. I think that only makes sense. That's the way life should be for everybody. Everybody should have a roof over their head and meals on the table. And if they don't, I think it behooves the government to take whatever measures are necessary to make sure that people do have those basics of humanity. So
I'm happy that a lot of people are getting helped, but I don't know if it's all the right people. From what I've heard, there's been some people taking advantage of it, and I think that could have been handled better so that the people that really need it get the money.
And I don't know really where my tax dollars are going. It would be nice if there was more information about exactly how it's being used, how it's being distributed. Yeah, it could be better. It could always be better.
I think that probably the largest majority of them probably have been, but of course we hear stories of some of the income replacement programs not really going to the right people or going to people that weren't really entitled to them. Here we heard a story that the people that were 16 or 17 years old were collecting CERB, and well, that was in the news, wasn't it? And then, they say the government says, well, they'll just collect it later. They're not going to collect that money again. And we realize, of course, this money now it's bad enough to be wasting our tax money, but this is really going to be borrowed money, isn't it? It's coming out of the deficit, which who knows if we'll ever pay back. So, but in total, I would say that I kind of agree that the government, if it doesn't act wisely or it doesn't put a lot of stimulus and take care of our health system, we could end up being into an economic recession, even a depression again. So
I can't really say with much wisdom on the spending in those areas. I feel like there's so many things being misplaced. I wouldn't know where to start if I was the finance minister, but I'd have to get more informed.
There have been some really good initiatives here in BC for helping low-income families out with rental rebates. I mean, the CERB thing was extremely beneficial for us as a couple. There have been some very good things. I'm not too sure about how the rest of the population feels. Considering my circumstances, we've been okay.
No, I don't think they spend any of our money wisely, honestly. I mean, again, you hear about the Attorney General and you hear about all this money that, Trudeau has paid out to his own family, or money that have gone to his family, that's, all this conflict of interest. And again, every time I turn around, there's somewhere else our money's going, and it just leaves us standing there with our mouth hanging open, and, but they seem to get away with it. And it's frustrating. It's frustrating. So, and I think the Trudeau government has become kind of arrogant about it. They just feel like there's no, there's nothing coming from it. People know their money's going, where it shouldn't, but what do we do? What do we do as Canadian taxpayers? We trust our money to them, and again and again and again you see in the news that it's where it shouldn't be going.
To be honest, I think that the money that's been spent on COVID-19, we could have used that money in other areas. Primarily, our youth is being affected adversely to the way that we're protecting all of our older generations with this pandemic. I think that we could have used our money a little bit wiser there.
I feel like it has up to this point where the vaccine is not getting rolled out evenly to all countries, especially Canada, which bought the justified amount for our citizens.
Yeah, I feel like actually that the government really stepped up, and I would be someone that would typically say no, but I feel like they made us feel safe during this time.
That's a tough question to say because I barely know where it goes to begin with, but I think that things like the CERB were a good first start. I honestly think that more of them could go towards certain things. I wouldn't mind paying a little bit more in taxes if I knew that my sister or my friend was going to be okay at the end of this pandemic.
Darned if I know. I really don't know. I figured they know more about money than I do. You know, I just live on my pension and I'm happy.
Well, from what I've read and understood, I would say in some cases it probably has been spent wisely, but there's some cases, for example, I'm sure everybody's aware of our CERB program. It's been terribly abused, and I know personally of cases that received thousands of dollars from CERB when they were not entitled to it.
Again, I don't really know enough about it, but I would say they're responding the best way that they possibly can. I mean, what else can they do? They're spending it on PPE and, you know, they're keeping people safe as much as they possibly can. But I would say yes. Yeah, they're doing the best they can.
Yeah. I mean, my kids' are going to be paying for it, but it's what we needed and no other choice.
That's a great question. I would love to know. I would love to know if that's true. Unfortunately, as a common citizen, I think it's pretty impossible to tell. We just kind of have to hope for the best and watch it all come out in the wash. I'm personally glad that CERB has been put in place. I mean, as a musician and then starting into part-time work, right? I don't know what I would have done without it, so I'm very appreciative for that. And I think there's a lot of citizens that their lives were literally saved by having access to money to pay for their food. So I think that that's a great expenditure on the part of the federal government. But other than that, I don't know where all the money's going. I don't know what's happening. I'd love to see the books.
Thanks for watching this episode of Outburst on the Cable Public Affairs channel. I'm Glenn McGuinness. If you have any comments about this show or any other show, you can find us on social media. You can also find us on our website at www.cpac.ca. It's your turn to speak up, and we're listening.